Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Please remember to subscribe so that you're kept up to date with all the videos that I upload. Today's video is going to be on completing the square. Now completing the square is actually quite an easy process provided you follow the step-by-step guidelines that I'm going to lay out for you. You can use completing the square to factorize a trinomial, or you could use completing the square if the question specifically asks you to complete the square. Completing the square is also useful in parabola questions or quadratic function questions in that it enables us to get the equation in the form that has the turning point already in it. We also need to be able to complete the square for our maximum and minimum questions. So please follow along, write out the questions as I go, pause, take notes, and just have a good time because maths doesn't have to be terrible, it could be fun as well. The step-by-step guidelines, as you see them on the screen, are broken up into two different guidelines based on what we're working with. Remember, there's a difference between completing the square in an expression and completing the square in an equation. Because when we complete the square in an expression, there's no equal sign. So we can't change the value of anything. So by just adding stuff to my expression, I'm actually changing the value of my expression. In an equation, when an equal sign is given, then we're able to balance our equation by doing the same thing to both sides. Also remember, in an equation, we can do whatever we want to do to an equation, provided what we do to the one side, we do to the other side. So the key point is to just identify whether you're working with an expression, no equal sign, or an equation with an equal sign. Both processes work the same way to a certain point. So the first step is that you need to ensure that there's no coefficient to the x squared, as in there's no a value, because we're going to complete the square with a quadratic equation or expression, which means that it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to be talking about a, b, and c. A, the coefficient of the x squared, b, the coefficient of the x, and c, the constant. So the first step is to remove or get rid of. So either we're going to remove it and keep it in an expression, the a value, or we're going to remove and get rid of the a value in an equation. But either way, the a value, the coefficient of the x squared, has to be 1. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is working with b. Now there are two ways that we can work with b. We can either take b and we can divide it by 2, or we can take b and we can multiply it by a half. Whether we divide b by 2 or we multiply b by a half, we're going to get the exact same answer. So it's up to you about what you feel most comfortable using. We're going to take b, we're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to square it. Now the b over 2 is what's going to give us our factorization bracket, and the answer, once I've squared it, is what I either add to both sides in an equation, or I add and subtract to an expression so that I keep it the same. Step number 3, I'm going to factorize if I'm working with an equation. Then I'm going to solve for both sides. Remember, when we square root, we have to have a plus minus answer. I'm going to do each of these steps step by step in each of the questions. So I'm going to start with some expressions and then I'm going to do some equations. If I look at my first example, I have x squared plus 8x plus 1. Whether I'm working with an equation or I'm working with an expression, my first step is I identify whether my a value is a 1. Now this is an expression. You can see it's an expression because there's no equal sign currently. My a value is a 1, which means that I can go straight into the next step. The next step is my b value. So I'm going to take my b value, which is 8, and I'm going to work with it kind of on the side. So I'm going to take b, I'm going to divide it by 2 or multiply it by half, and I'm going to square it. Alright, so b is 8 over 2, and I'm going to square it. Now, 8 over 2 I can simplify as 4 squared, and 4 squared gives me 16. So what I've created is this over here will be my brackets. And I'm working with an expression, so this over here is what I'm going to add and subtract. Now the reason that we add and subtract is because, do you agree that 1 minus 1 is actually 0? So I'm not technically doing anything to this to change its value because it's an expression. However, by adding and subtracting to the same side, the way I add and subtract enables me to complete this square. So now I have x squared plus 8x. Now I'm going to pause, and the value that I'm adding and subtracting to both sides I'm going to put in here, but I'm going to add first. Always add first. So we add 16 and we subtract 16 because now 16 minus 16 is 0, so technically I'm not doing anything. Then I need to just carry down my plus 1. Alright? Now what I've done over here with this x squared plus 8x plus 16 is I've created a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to factorize this as x plus 4. Where did I get that plus 4 from? From over here, from what I said is going in my brackets. So that's x plus 4 all squared. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off this minus 16 plus 1, and minus 16 plus 1 is negative 15. So what I've said now is that x squared plus 8x plus 1 is the same as x plus 4 all squared minus 15. So I've taken it from the form ax squared plus bx plus c, and I've completed the square. In our next question, we have x squared minus 4x minus 13. So this is an expression because there is no equal sign. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if I have an a value, and my a value is 1, so that's good. So I can start straight away. How do I start? I start by taking my b value, so I'm going to say b over 2 squared is equal to. Now, that b over 2 needs to have the sign with it because that's going to affect the bracket that we factorize. So I have minus 4, because b is minus 4, not positive 4, minus 4 over 2 all squared. Now, minus 4 over 2 can be simplified. So I like to simplify what can be simplified before I square it out. So minus 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and that's all squared. And negative 2 squared is positive 4. So now I have my bracket, which is going to be for my factorization. So I have what's going in my bracket, as well as what I'm going to, because it's an expression, add and subtract. So this is going to give me x squared minus 4x, and I'm going to start by adding and subtracting. Remember, we add first and then subtract. So plus 4 minus 4, and then carry down my minus 13. What I've done now is I've created a perfect square trinomial that I can factorize. Now I'd be able to just factorize that perfect square trinomial in my head, but I have created the bracket factor on the side in my side note. So it just makes life a lot easier. So it's x minus 2 squared, and then I'm going to finish this up by saying minus 4 minus 13, which is negative 17. So x squared minus 4x minus 13 is the same as x minus 2 all squared minus 17. So if I were given x minus 2 all squared minus 17 and I were to expand that bracket and simplify and collect my terms, I would end up with x squared minus 4x minus 13. If I have 5x squared minus 20x plus 30. Alright, so now I have an expression. How do I know that I have an expression? Because there's no equal sign. However, I now have an a value. My a value is 5. Now there's a difference with working with the a value depending if we're working with an expression or an equation. Because it's an expression, I cannot divide everything by that 5 and drop the 5. Because if I were to drop that 5, I would be losing that 5 and I would be changing the value of my expression. I'd be changing it up, and it's not an equation, so I can't do that. But I can't have a coefficient of the x squared. I can't have that a value. So I need to remove the a value. So whether it's an expression or an equation, we're going to remove the a value, but just how we remove it is a little bit different in the two methods. So in this method, I am going to remove it by factoring it out. So I'm going to take it out, but keep it there, because now it's still there, but it's just out of what I want to work with. So 5x squared divided by 5 is x squared. Minus 20x divided by 5 is minus 4x. And positive 30 divided by 5 is positive 6. So now I've removed the a value, but I've kept it there because I'm working with an expression. So I'm now going to work the exact same way, and I am going to take my b over 2 and I'm going to square it. So my b value, remember with the sign, I factored out the 5. I'm going to put it back right at the end. But for now, I'm just going to work with the trinomial. I'm going to, in my mind, ignore that 5. And I'm going to work with the trinomial of x squared minus 4x plus 6 for now. So I'm going to take my b value, which is negative 4, over 2 squared. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. That's squared. Negative 2 squared is 4. So by doing this, I have now said that minus 2 is what's going to go in my brackets. And the positive 4 is what, because it's an expression, I'm going to add and subtract. So like normal factorization, I'm going to keep this 5, and I'm going to have x squared minus 4x. Then I'm going to plus the 4, and I'm going to subtract the 4, and then I'm going to carry down my plus 6. Don't forget about your plus 6. All right, so I have 5. Don't forget about the 5. So now I'm going to change it to a square bracket just because I'm going to factorize my trinomial now, so I'm going to have a round bracket. So I'm going to have x. I take what I said is going in the bracket, which is minus 2, all squared. Then I'm going to finish it up over here. Minus 4 plus 6 is positive 2. Now completing the square is taking my quadratic equation or expression from standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c, into the form a into x plus or minus p all squared plus q. So it's changing the form of it. Now, if you agree, if I'm looking at the form a into x minus p all squared plus q, the a value has to be there and the q value has to be by itself. So at the moment, this 5 being outside this bracket is causing a little bit of a challenge for us, but that's no problem. All we need to do is we remember we took the 5 out, so now we need to put the 5 back in. So I'm going to take this 5 and I'm going to multiply it in, so it's actually going to be my a value. But what I do to the 1, I have to multiply it in with the brackets and with that positive over there, that positive 2. So it will be 5 into x minus 2 all squared, and 5 times 2, which is 10. If I have 3x squared minus 12x plus 2, I'm working with an expression. Why am I working with an expression? Well, because there's no equal sign. However, in this case, I have an a value. My a value is 3. So I need to, first step, get rid of the a value. Remember, in an expression, I'm just taking it out for now. I'm keeping it safe. In an equation, I'm going to get rid of it altogether. So I'm going to remove that 3. So 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. Negative 12x divided by 3 is negative 4x. And positive 2 divided by 3 is positive 2 over 3. Remember, because 2 can't actually be divided by 3. So now I'm going to say b over 2 squared. So the b value is negative 4 over 2 all squared. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 squared, and negative 2 squared is positive 4. So now I've got what's going into my brackets. As well as, because it's an expression, what I am adding and subtracting. So the 3 is going to stay outside. X squared minus 4x. I add first, so it's plus 4. Then I need to subtract 4. Plus 2 over 3 is equal to. So now inside this bracket, I've created a perfect square trinomial. I'm going to keep the 3 on the outside for the moment. And now I'm going to open a square bracket because I'm going to put a round bracket inside. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 factorizes as x minus 2 all squared. Then I'm going to say minus 4 plus 2 over 3, and I'm going to get negative 10 over 3. All right, but now that 3 on the outside, I took it out, so I need to put it back. So I'm going to multiply it in with both terms inside the brackets. So now I have 3 into x minus 2 all squared, and then 3 times negative 10 over 3 is negative 10. So if I took 3x squared minus 12x plus 2 in standard form, and I changed the form and I completed the square, I would get 3 into x minus 2 all squared minus 10. Alright, so now we are working with an equation. There's an equation already, so this is different to the expressions that we have been doing. So the first step is we still look, irrespective of the fact that it's an equation, we still ensure that there's no a value, or that the a value is 1. If I look here, I've got an a value which is 1, so that's good, so there's nothing more that I need to do with that. My next step is my b value. So I'm going to take my b value, I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm going to square it. So the b value, remember you keep the sign with it, is minus 1 over 2 all squared. Now minus 1 over 2 doesn't simplify any further, so I'll keep that for my bracket. And then minus 1 over 2 squared is positive 1 over 4. Alright, so exactly the same as what we did do with an expression. We have the minus 1 over 2, which gives us our brackets. And then we have the 1 over 4, or the quarter. Now this is where the difference comes in. This is an equation, so we are going to add to both sides. So with an equation, I like to think of it as the ABC of completing the square. So A, we first check that there's no coefficients of the x squared. B, we determine our b value, b over 2 squared, and we determine that little bit on the side. And then C. So the C value we're going to take across the equal sign, so that basically all I have is the ax squared plus b on the left hand side of the equal sign, and then the C on the right hand side. So that means that I would have x squared minus x on the left hand side equal to the negative 12 when it goes across becomes positive 12. Now I'm going to follow my process exactly like what I did before. So I'm going to say x squared minus x, and I'm going to start with the adding. Now in the expression I added and subtracted it because it was an expression. Now I'm adding, but I'm doing it to both sides so that I'm balancing the equation out. So I have plus a quarter equal to 12 plus a quarter. I said a quarter and I wrote a half. Cool. All right, now what we're going to do is on the left-hand side over here, we have our perfect square trinomial that we're going to factorize. So we have x minus a half squared. 12 plus a quarter is 12 and a quarter, but I'm going to write it as an improper fraction of 49 over 4. All right, but this is an equation, so I want to solve this equation. So in order to solve this equation, I have to get rid of that square. Now to get rid of that square, I'm going to square root. Now remember, the most important thing when you square root a number is that you get a plus minus answer. You cannot forget your plus minus. So when I square root that entire bracket of x minus a half squared, I'm left with x minus a half equal to, now I'm square rooting the other side, which means that I have a plus minus, so it gives me two answers, a positive answer and a negative answer. The square root of 49 over 4, 49 is a perfect square, square root of 49 is 7, over square root of 4 is 2. So I can now break up this plus minus into two different answers. So therefore, x minus a half is equal to 7 over 2, or x minus a half is equal to negative 7 over 2. If x minus a half is equal to 7 over 2, that means that x is equal to 7 over 2 plus a half, which is 8 over 2, which is 4. Obviously, you could go straight to the 4. If x minus a half is equal to negative 7 over 2, that means that x is equal to negative 7 over 2 plus a half, which is negative 6 over 2, which is equal to negative 3. So that means that I've solved for x. In the equation x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0, I know that x will be 4 and x will be negative 3. X squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0. So we have equals 0, so we have an equation. So when we have an equation, it's the A, B, C. First get rid of the A, then do my B side step, and then my C is what I'm going to take across the equal sign. So the first step is A. So if I look over here, I've got no A, so I'm good. My next step is B. What do? B divided by 2 all squared, or B times a half all squared, doesn't matter. B is 4 over 2 squared. 4 over 2 can be simplified. 4 divided by 2 is 2 squared, and 2 squared is 4. So this positive 2 is what I have for my brackets. And this positive 4 is what I'm now going to add to both sides. Why am I adding it to both sides? Because it's an equation and not an expression. All right, A done, B done, C. Take the C value across. So I have x squared plus 4x equal to, my C is positive 1. When it goes across, it becomes negative 1. So now I've got x squared plus 4x, and I'm going to add my 4 to both sides. So I'm going to say plus 4 is equal to, on the other side I have minus 1, and I'm going to add plus 4. So now I have my perfect square trinomial on the left-hand side, and that's what I'm going to factorize using what I have over here as my brackets. So I have x plus 2 all squared is equal to minus 1 plus 4, which is 3. Now I want to solve this equation, so I want to get a value for x, so that means I need to get rid of that square. So I'm going to square root both sides. Remember, when you square root both sides, you have a plus minus answer. So the square root of x plus 2 all squared is x plus 2 is equal to plus minus, 3 is not a perfect square, so it's going to stay the square root of 3. So when I'm solving for x, I'm going to take this plus minus and I'm going to break it up into my two answers. So x plus 2 is equal to positive root 3, or x plus 2 is equal to negative root 3. So if x plus 2 is equal to root 3, that means that x is equal to negative 2 plus root 3, or x is equal to negative 2 minus root 3. Remember that this positive 2 is going to become a negative when it goes across the equal sign. I have x squared plus 12x plus 3 equals 19. It's an equation. I have an equal sign, so that means that I'm going to do my ABC method. A, check the coefficient of x squared, the a value. There is no a value. Good. B, determine my b side note. B divided by 2 all squared. What is b? B is 12 divided by 2 all squared. 12 divided by 2 can be simplified as 6 squared is equal to 6 squared, which is 36. Now the 6 is what I'm going to use in my brackets. and the 36 is what I'm going to add to both sides. So A is ensuring that there's no coefficient to the x squared. B is doing my B side note, and then C is take your C value to the other side or your constant to the other side. So I'm going to have x squared plus 12x. Now there's already a 19 across the other side, so when the positive 3 goes across, it becomes a negative 3, and 19 minus 3 is 16. Now I'm going to do the step of adding to both sides. So I have x squared plus 12x plus 36 is equal to 16, and then I still have to do plus 36 because I have to add it to both sides to keep it balanced. Now I've created my perfect square trinomial, which I'm going to factorize as x plus 6 squared is equal to, and then I have 13, nope, I don't have 13, I have 16 plus 36, which gives me 52. I want to solve this equation, so I need to get rid of that square. In order to get rid of that square, I'm going to square root both sides. The square root of x plus 6 all squared is x plus 6 equal to, remember when you square root, you have a plus minus answer. 52 is not a perfect square, so I have the square root of 52. Now I'm just going to write it in a little bit of an easier way, bearing in mind that I still want to incorporate both of my answers, my positive and my negative. I can say that therefore x is equal to, what happens to the positive 6 when it goes across? It becomes a negative 6, and then I'm going to write it out as plus minus 52, just because we want little shortcuts every now and then. So now I've still got both answers. It's minus, because then I could read it as x equals minus 6 plus the square root of 52, or x equals minus 6 minus the square root of 52. Last example, 2x squared plus 16x minus 20. My first step is A, then B, then C. So A here, so I'm working with an equation, but I have an A value. So my first step when I'm working with my equation and I'm solving for x by completing the square, I need to get rid of my A value. Now remember, I'm just going to quickly remind you, in an expression, we just factor it out. So we just take it out, but we keep it there because we don't want to change the value. But in an equation, I'm just going to divide everything by the A value. So I'm dividing everything by 2. 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. 16x divided by 2 is positive 8x minus 10 is equal to 0. All right, A, I got rid of A. Next step is my B side note. So B over 2 all squared. So B is 8. 8 divided by 2 squared. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 4 squared is 16. So now I have the 4, which is going to be my brackets. And I have the 16, and I'm working with an equation, so I'm adding to both sides. So A, I get rid of A. B, I do my B side note, and then C, I need to take my C across the equal sign. So I have x squared plus 8x equal to, the negative 10 now becomes positive 10. So I have x squared plus 8x. Now I'm going to add my 16 is equal to 10 add 16. I now have my perfect square trinomial over here that I'm going to factorize as x plus 4 all squared equal to 10 plus 16, which is 26. I want to solve this, which means that I need to get rid of that square, which means I'm going to square root both sides. Remember, when I square root both sides, I have a plus minus answer. So I get x plus 4 equal to plus minus the square root of 26. So therefore, x is equal to, so I'm going to just do the short version, The positive 4, when it goes across, now becomes negative 4. And then plus minus the square root of 26. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. This video also links in really well with the video that I did on quadratic functions. So be sure to check out the quadratic functions video as well.